Hello students, let's start with the next topic, political executive. Students, at different levels of any government, we find functionaries who take day-to-day decisions but do not exercise supreme power on behalf of the people. All those functionaries are collectively known as the executive. They are called executive because they are in charge of the execution of the policies of government. Thus, when we talk about the government, we usually mean the executive. Children, in a democratic country, two categories make up the executive: political and permanent. One that is elected by the people for a specific period is called the political executive. Political leaders who take the big decisions fall in this category. And the next category is permanent executive. People are appointed on a long term basis. This is called the permanent executive or civil services. Persons working in civil services are called civil servants. They remain in office even when the ruling party changes. These officers work under political executive and assist them in carrying out the day-to-day administration. Dear students, we all know that the civil servant is usually more educated and has more expert knowledge of the subject. The advisors working in the finance ministry know more about economics than the finance minister. Sometimes the ministers may know very little about the technical matters that come under their ministry. This could easily happen in ministries like defense, industry, health, science, and technology. Then, here we have a question: why is the minister more powerful than the civil servants? The reason is very simple. In a democracy, the will of the people is supreme. The minister is elected by the people and thus empowered to exercise the will of the people on their behalf. Minister is finally answerable to the people for all the consequences of his/her decision. That is why the minister takes all the final decisions. The minister is not and is not expected to be an expert in the matters of her ministry. The minister takes the advice of experts on all technical matters and then take the decision. Now let's study about the Prime Minister and Council of Ministers. Prime Minister is the most important political institution in the country. Yet there is no direct election to the post of the Prime Minister. The President appoints the Prime Minister. The President appoints the leader of the majority party or the coalition of parties that commands a majority in the Lok Sabha as Prime Minister. In case no single party or alliance gets a majority, the President appoints the person most likely to secure a majority support. The Prime Minister does not have a fixed tenure. He continues in power so long as he remains the leader of the majority party or coalition. After the appointment of the Prime Minister, the President appoints other ministers on the advice of the Prime Minister, which are usually from the majority party or the coalition that has the majority in the Lok Sabha. The Prime Minister is free to choose ministers as long as they are members of Parliament. Sometimes a person who is not a member of Parliament can also become a minister, but such a person has to get elected to one of the houses of the Parliament within 6 months of appointment as minister. Students, Council of Ministers is the official name for the body that includes all the ministers. It usually has 60 to 80 ministers of different ranks. Let's read about them. First, cabinet ministers. Cabinet ministers are usually top level leaders of the ruling party or parties who are in charge of the major ministries. Cabinet is thus the inner ring of the Council of Ministers. It comprises about 25 ministers. Next one is Ministers of State with independent charge. They are usually in charge of smaller ministries. They participate in the cabinet meetings only when specially invited. Next, Ministers of State. Ministers of State assigned to assist cabinet ministers and the Ministers of State with independent charge. Students, it is not practical for all ministers to meet regularly and discuss everything. The decisions are taken in cabinet meetings. That is why parliamentary democracy in most countries is often known as the cabinet form of government. Cabinet meets to take decisions. Every ministry has secretaries who are civil servants. The secretaries provide the necessary background information to the ministers to take decisions. The cabinet as a team is assisted by the cabinet secretariat. Powers of the Prime Minister. As head of the government, the Prime Minister has wide-ranging powers. He chairs cabinet meetings. He coordinates the work of different departments. His decisions are final in case disagreements arise between departments. He exercises general supervision of different ministers. All ministers work under his leadership. The Prime Minister distributes and redistributes work to the ministers. He also has the power to dismiss ministers. When the Prime Minister quits, the entire ministry quits. Thus, if the cabinet is the most powerful institution in India, within the cabinet it is the Prime Minister who is the most powerful. Students, the powers of the Prime Minister in all parliamentary democracies of the world have increased so much in recent decades that parliamentary democracies are sometimes seen as prime ministerial form of government. In India too, we have seen such a tendency towards the concentration of powers in the hands of the Prime Minister. Jawaharlal Nehru, the first Prime Minister of India, exercised enormous authority because he had great influence over the public. Indira Gandhi was also a very powerful leader compared to her colleagues in the cabinet. Now let's discuss about the limitation to power of Prime Minister. Rise of coalition politics has imposed certain constraints on the power of the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister of coalition government cannot take decisions as he likes. He has to accommodate different groups and factions in his party as well as among alliance partners. He also has to heed to the views and positions of the coalition partners and other parties on whose support the survival of the government depends.